Our second scripture lesson this morning comes from the Gospel of John in the second chapter. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple with the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. My primary emotion to any adversity is and always has been anger. Does that surprise you? Do I come off like an angry person to you? Do you know who John McEnroe is? The tennis player? He was known as a hothead, and that's an understatement. My freshman year of high school, I was awarded the John McEnroe Award from my tennis coach. And really, this stemmed from one particular moment. I was playing against this boy from a rival high school, and I was better than him, but he was beating me. He was beating me, and I can remember his play style, and I thought, that's a little cheap. He played obnoxiously. And he won this match. And friends, I was angry, and I threw my racket. But I didn't just throw my racket down. I threw my racket over the fence. And I didn't just throw it over the fence, I threw it over his side of the fence. So I threw my racket over the net, over this poor boy, and over that fence. Now that's a walk of shame. To leave the tennis courts, seeing my coach bewildered at this moment, and having to go reclaim my tennis racket. And at the end of the year, I got a trophy to remind me that I was an absolute nut, that I was so ridiculous in this moment. My anger had not only got the better of me, it absolutely embarrassed me. I look back at that story and I go, oh, that's kind of silly, but also outrageous. I'm so glad my parents weren't at that match watching this, how mortified they would be to see that behavior publicly. Now, friends, I have grown up. Pastor John has not had to give me any John McEnroe awards. Not one this year. It's been a good year. No, ever. He's never had to give me a John McEnroe award. Nonetheless, let me tell you, this is true. I contend with anger often, daily. Hear me, I'm not saying I'm about to fly off the handle. I'm not going to throw a tennis racket anymore, but I have some big feelings. I'm a passionate person, and those big feelings often come out as anger. One of my classes for my doctorate dealt with anger in particular. It was really an alternative perspective on anger, a class that I found truly helpful. We highlighted the fact that emotions are just emotions. There's not a wrong emotions. They're simply helpful indicators of how we are feeling, how we are interacting with the world around us. They simply express what is going on internally. And anger certainly can be one of those helpful indicators. When we are feeling angry, we are experiencing a perceived threat. Something has touched upon something that feels scary. Maybe we could lose something. We feel like something is unjust or dangerous or problematic. To feel anger or to be angry is not bad. It's simply telling. So it's a great class for me. I felt mostly encouraged, except for the fact that just because anger is a feeling and it isn't necessarily bad, it doesn't mean that it's justified when our anger is expressed in certain ways or in unhealthy tendencies. And that's my issue. Most of my anger is not righteous anger. Most of my anger is wrongtious. I have wrongtious anger, friends. It's an issue that's coming to me in sort of this self-centric, selfish way. It's because I'm hurt, or my pride is hurt, or I get caught up in arrogance, or I'm feeling insecure. But there are times when my anger is a righteous thing. And I know this too. Here's how I can tell. My wrongtious anger only really ever persists to me. It only is a part of what I'm experiencing. Its impact is almost always isolated in me. Where my righteous anger is almost always pointed outward. It's for the care of others. It's an injustice somewhere out in the world. I see the hurt of other people. This doesn't mean that I can throw things or yell or act aggressively just because my anger is righteous. It's just pointing me towards something that's happening in the world, and I should then contend with that thing. What's been making you angry? Or maybe anger is not your dominant emotion like it is mine. So what's been making you upset or anxious or despairing? What's been stirring up those perceived threats in you? Does it relate to change? Does it relate to something that feels stuck in your life? Is this a fear of what might happen or is already happening? It's good that we have some of these conversations about our feelings. That helps us address the whole person, our entire being. It's a vulnerable work, but it's illuminating to introspect and really have a sense of what am I feeling and why am I feeling that way. And I think we're getting better and more comfortable about holding our feelings and the feelings of others, the realities of their feelings. I think that's a cultural, societal shift where we're saying it's good and positive to be more in tune with our feelings. But with Jesus, to see him contending with big feelings, I don't know, for me, this text is a little uncomfortable in this way. I want to say, yeah, certainly Jesus is human, but this human, as we read in this text today, it's a little jarring to see Jesus as emotive as he is. I don't think this is an easy text for us to interact with. It creates some uncomfortable tensions in how we perceive Jesus and therefore how we perceive God. It's not easy, but we're going to look directly at the situation here, so we really see what unfolds. Now, if I flipped over a table right now, it would shock us. In a public place, if any person just flipped over a temple and made that sort of ruckus, that sort of scene, we would be aghast, truly shocked. For Jesus to be that person is hard to imagine. And this was after he fashioned a whip of cords and drove out the cattle. Friends, I was really hoping that a whip of cords was like a stock whip. It was just about making a loud noise to herd cattle. It's not the case. I looked up the Greek. The translation here is a scourge. This is a not gentle image, which bothers me because I see Jesus as a gentle man. Well, in fact, he is a gentle man. Look how he invites children to him. Look at how he heals. Look at how he forgives, what he teaches, how he teaches these things. Friends, let's not lose sight of the fact that Jesus is gentle. God is gentle, but Jesus here is also serious and passionate. And in this moment, angry. It's tough to imagine Jesus this way, but that's the way we get him today. Here's what helps me in this passage. No one stops him. There's no intervention here. No one shouts and says, hey, oh, don't do that. Jesus doesn't go to jail. He doesn't get a misdemeanor charge. No one really seems to be that bothered. Surprised, yes, certainly. Maybe amazed, but this is how the crowd responds. This is what they say. Those present in the temple ask, "What sign can you show us? What miracle can you prove yourself here with, Jesus? What gives you the authority to behave like this and call this temple your Father's house?" Y'all, this is in chapter 2 in John's Gospel. This is early in Jesus' ministry. Folks don't really know him yet, but even in this most extreme scenario, folks are interested in what he has to say, what he has to show. And he's got everyone's attention in this moment, certainly. All eyes are on Jesus. And what he chooses to say in the moment of all this attention is something rather cryptic. He speaks about the temple and the destruction of the temple and how he will raise it up in 3 days. A new temple will arise. And maybe for us who know how the story ends, this is a depiction of the new temple of our faith, the restoration of us being made whole. The body is dead and buried and resurrected. That coincides with what we understand theologically about God through the person of Jesus. It's why I think the lectionary gives this text in Lent, that it's ultimately where we are heading towards, that Jesus is paving the way towards healing and restoration of body, mind, and spirit. True, that's for us individually, but also of the temple, of community, of relationships, of society, of any structures that are currently broken. It's good news tomorrow, but it's anger today. Because the world needs changing just like the temple did. Whips, pouring out coins, overturning tables. Y'all, in truth, I just hope this is an embellishment. I hope this is an exaggeration. I hope the gospel writers are like, this is going to really drive home the point. But if they didn't, I think Jesus is still in the right here. I think this is an example of righteous anger. Jesus' ministry did not happen in the golden days of Jerusalem. They were being occupied by Rome. There was rampant poverty and violence and crime. Sometimes I think when we imagine the stories of Jesus, he's walking the dusty road and it's a very gentle teaching and the crowds are coming and it's a festive moment. I think that is how we envision a lot of the story backdrop of Jesus. But friends, the crowds are there because they're desperate. The world is chaotic. The people are a little terrified. And so part of the engagement with Jesus is the serious nature of what's happening in their world around them. And maybe just at this moment, this one part in Jesus' ministry, he truly just has enough. No more economic structures that hurt people. No more religion that overburdens the already overburdened. No more gentle rebukes for wicked practices. Not today. Maybe Jesus loses his cool. Maybe he regrets the spectacle of it all. I don't know. But I trust him. I trust his passion. I trust God's conviction in the world. And at the end of the day, it's never been about the overturned temple tables. It's been about this table. This table that feeds the hungry and gives hope to the hopeless. This table that brings unity and peace to friend and foe. This table that we gather around in fellowship and in faith.